All right. Good morning, students. Welcome. I hope I'm audible, online students. Vicky, Rutuja, good morning. Chaliye. Now, we were talking about the Vijayanagara Empire. We had already talked about the background or origin and about the important political developments. Now we need to address the administration of the Vijayanagara Empire, within which किसके किसके बारे में बात करनी है? Central administration, provincial administration, revenue administration, feudal administration, village administration. We need to address the debate regarding the nature of the Vijayanagar state and whether the Vijayanagar Empire was the product of Hindu revivalism or not. Okay? Now, first of all, some general thoughts about administration. तो क्या लगता है आपको कि what were those factors which shaped the Vijayanagar Empire और Vijayanagar administration? उसके जो institutions थे, administrative practices थे, उसका कोई ना कोई background रहा होगा ना? तो वो कहाँ से आया होगा background? From the local environment, but also from North India. ठीक है? So the Vijayanagar Empire its administration was based on a combination of local traditions in addition to the classical state model of North India. Okay? So, how the king was seen, what were supposed to be its duties, what was to be its relationship with the other subjects, what was the king's position with respect to the members of his court, ये सारी चीजें जो क्लासिकल स्टेट मॉडल है नॉर्थ इंडिया का दी बेस्ड ऑन दी अर्थशास्त्र एंड दी धर्मशास्त्रास वहां से बोरो किया गया है बट it is also reflective of local traditions. Before the Vijayanagara Empire in this region, a number of glorious dynasties had already come and gone, beginning from the Pallava period onward. Pallavas, Cholas, Rashtrakutas, Chalukyas, ये सब यहाँ पे रोल कर चुके हैं. They have all left their own imprint on the political theory. Another important factor which shaped the nature of the state क्या था? What was the environment within which the Vijayanagar Empire flourished? Was there this a period of great peace and stability, or was this a period of instability and constant warfare? Instability and constant warfare. So constant warfare and the presence of hostile neighbors created some compulsions for the state and the rulers had to respond. ठीक है. Thirdly, और क्या फैक्टर रहा होगा in shaping the state's policies? What other factor would have been there? Material concerns also. Material concerns, which were to do with trade, crafts, social cohesion, and maintaining or projecting a particular cultural image of the state. Along with security considerations, in addition to maintaining or managing the internal balance of power between the king and the other powerful elements. Etc. Okay? So these were some of the factors which shaped the Vijayanagar administration. और हमें अब देखना क्या है? How these factors were reflected in every aspect of the Vijayanagar administration. बिल्कुल एग्रीकल्चर भी आप इसमें ऐड कर सकते हो. इसको इनफैक्ट यहाँ पे ऐड करना चाहिए. ट्रेड, क्राफ्ट्स, एग्रीकल्चर. ठीक है. तो राइट डाउन the Vijayanagar administration. The Vijayanagar administration was an evolved one. Was an evolved one. Rather than an imposed one. Rather than an imposed one. Full stop. It was shaped. It was shaped by the following forces. Number one, local traditions in combination with the classical state model of North India. Under this, write down. The Vijayanagar rulers inherited. इसी में. The Vijayanagar rulers inherited the state theory evolved under preceding dynasties such as the Pallavas, Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas, Hoysalas, and Kakatiyas, with some modifications. With some modifications. Next subpoint. Additionally, the Vijayanagar state was theoretically based on the classical model of the state of North India, as put forward by the Dharma Shastras. ठीक है? नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो, नंबर 2. The institutions and practices of the Vijayanagar state were also shaped due to the prevailing external environment characterized by constant warfare with hostile neighbors. Full stop. Subpoint. This created unique challenges and concerns, compelling rulers to respond accordingly. ठीक है? Next, number 3. Lastly, the Vijayanagar administration was shaped in response to objective material factors full stop. These included subpoint economic priorities such as agriculture, trade, and crafts production. Next subpoint, social cohesion, and securing political legitimacy for the state. Next subpoint, adopting and projecting a distinct cultural identity. Next subpoint, security with the objective of stability and growth. Next subpoint, maintaining a healthy balance of power between the king and the other powerful elements. Between the king and the other powerful elements, with the objective of ensuring stability and longevity. ठीक है, तो ये हो गए एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन को शेप करने वाले इंपॉर्टेंट फैक्टर्स. नाउ वन बाय वन all of these aspects of administration. Give the subheading central administration. तो बताओ, how would you describe the Vijayanagar Empire? कौन सा political model follow होता था at the center? What was the position of the king? Did he rule like a constitutional monarch or like an absolute monarch? Absolute monarch, despotism था. Theoretically, the king had no check on his authority except for the prescriptions of the Dharma Shastras. So Dharma Shastras enjoined some duties upon the ruler. Some rulers adopted them, followed them. In fact, it was a part and parcel of the ruling philosophy to observe the injunctions of the Dharma Shastras. And that is why, although the rule of most of the rulers of the Vijayanagar Empire was despotic, in most cases, it was beneficial for the people. These despots were not tyrants. They were benevolent rulers because of these self-imposed checks on their authority. So rule was despotic but not arbitrary. People were not discriminated upon. The rulers, the state did not target their lives and liberty without any cause. तो arbitrariness कम था इसकी वजह से. ठीक है. Was the king in charge of every aspect of government or not? No. He was. So he was the supreme commander of the forces. He was also the chief foreign policy officer, right? So it was up to him to decide when to declare war, when to sue for peace. He was also responsible for the administration of the realm. So he was also the chief executive officer within the empire. He was also sitting on top of the entire judicial and legal machinery. So he was the Supreme Court of Justice, so final court of appeal, वही राजा ही होता था. He used to manage all these responsibilities through a council of ministers and a secretariat. ठीक है. अब यहाँ पे जो ऑफिशियल्स थे उनका रोल क्या था? Did they have real authority or were their roles more advisory in nature? More advisory in nature थे. ठीक है. So the king used to devolve authority onto them. They could not exceed the authority that the king had given to them. And it was not as if कि एक बार power दे दिया king ने तो उनका power permanently हो गया. Whenever the king wanted, he could remove the official. He could place another official on that position. He could also reduce the powers enjoyed by a certain official when it was called for. ठीक है. So these ministers were also permanently beholden to the king. This is another aspect of central administration. ठीक है. तो ये जो council of ministers होता था, this was called the मंत्री परिषद. It consisted of officials of ministers who were handpicked by the sovereign. They could be removed at any point of time. They were paid directly out of the imperial treasury. They served as at the pleasure of the king. Right? तो ये सारे इसके characteristics थे. Below the मंत्री परिषद came a secretariat, a central secretariat known as the Sachivalaya. It consisted of a number of secretaries or sachivs who were career bureaucrats. They looked after day-to-day administration in the various departments. तो रेवेन्यू एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन है तो रेवेन्यू सेक्रेटरीज और उसके अंडर पूरा ब्यूरोक्रेसी रहेगा. देन इफ इट इज अबाउट ये military administration, so military secretary, and below that an entire bureaucracy. Law and order, so एक police chief, and below them an entire bureaucracy. Once again, they enjoyed their positions and privileges at the pleasure of the sovereign. So whenever the sovereign wanted, these people could either be removed or be transferred. They could be promoted, demoted. जो करना चाहे ruler कर सकता था. Right? What was the position of the king in the eyes of the people? How did the people view the king? As simply a political leader or as something more? No, as something more. So, idea of divine rights of kings was adopted by the Vijayanagara rulers. The Vijayanagara rulers claimed that they were ruling on the behalf of the supreme god, Lord Virupaksha, who was an incarnation of Lord Shiva. ठीक है. तो वो क्या बोल रहे थे? We are representatives of Lord Virupaksha. And जिस तरह से आप विरूपाक्ष के towards devoted हैं, loyal हैं, you owe the same loyalty to his chosen people. ठीक है. So he was not simply a sovereign political leader, but he was also the ritualistic sovereign when it came to the common people. Is this clear? Achha. Was there any fixed law of succession? तो विजयनगर एम्पायर हिंदू पावर था या नॉन हिंदू पावर, मुस्लिम पावर था? हिंदू पावर था. अब मुस्लिम्स में देयर इज नेवर एनी फिक्स्ड रूल ऑफ सक्सेशन, लेकिन हिंदू स्टेट्स में देयर इज ऑलवेज गोइंग टू बी अ फिक्स्ड रूल ऑफ सक्सेशन, either the law of primogeniture or something else. ठीक है. यहां पे क्या था? Either the younger brother or the eldest son of the ruler is going to be appointed as the crown prince or yuvraj or kumar while the king is still alive. ठीक है. तो during the lifetime of the king ही वो अपना उत्तराधिकारी nominate कर देता था, either the younger brother or the eldest son. ठीक है. And both of them used to rule jointly. The prince was often sent on a tour of the entire territory. उसको जगह जहां पे जाया जाएगा, he would live at the courts of the various provincial governors. He would meet with the important military leaders, the Amar Nayakas, and he is going to cultivate personal relationships with them. He is going to gain first-hand experience. Then he is going to be recalled to the capital. He is going to learn about the financial administration, revenue administration, military administration from the perspective of the king. He is going to learn to manage foreign dignitaries, diplomats, both hostile and friendly. He is going to meet a number of businessmen, a number of traders. He's going to listen to the appeals of the common people. He's going to learn about their aspirations and thus shape his views regarding his responsibilities accordingly. तो जब राजा मरेगा तो कि जो अगला राजा होगा ही इज ऑलरेडी वेल प्रिपेयर्ड, उसको पूरी तैयारी हो चुकी है. तो इसका रिजल्ट क्या होगा? अ चॉपी रफ ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर और स्मूथ ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर. स्मूथ ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर. सेकेंडली, क्योंकि पुराने राजा ने पूरा अपने जोर से बोल दिया था कि मेरे मरने के बाद उत्तराधिकारी यही रहेगा. Is there going to be any room for a war of succession between the brothers of the or between the different sons of the king? भाइयों के बीच में लड़ाई का कोई स्कोप बचेगा? नहीं बचेगा, क्योंकि पिताजी ने साफ साफ बोल दिया है, पहले ही डिक्लेयर कर दिया गया है. राइट. सो दीज वर द एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ सेंट्रल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. लिख लें इसको, राइट डाउन. द किंग कॉल्ड, किंग को क्या बोलते थे? बताया था कल, राया. राया was an absolute monarch. Was an absolute monarch. Full stop. Theoretically, he did not have any check on his authority. Except for the rules of the Dharma Shastras. Except for the rules of the Dharma Shastras. Full stop. Subpoint. The majority of Vijayanagara rulers, the majority of Vijayanagara rulers observed these rules, comma, making them benevolent towards the general population. The question है, how did Dharmashastra traditions come to South India in medieval period, as during that time Muslim rule was in North India? तो ये बताओ कि धर्मशास्त्रास किस टाइम पीरियड में कंपाइल किए गए? धर्मशास्त्रास कब बनाए गए? पोस्ट मौर्यन और गुप्ता पीरियड के बीच में. बाय दैट पॉइंट ऑफ टाइम नॉर्थ इंडिया में क्या इस्लामिक रूल एस्टैब्लिश हुआ था? नहीं हुआ था. ठीक है. What was the nature of the Gupta Empire? Was it a small regional principality of North India or was it a pan-Indian empire? Pan-Indian empire. वो अपने कई सारे administrators को South India में place करेगा. Many of its provincial governors later went on to create their own kingdoms. ठीक है. Secondly, during the post-Gupta period, South India में there was a diffusion of North Indian culture. Brahmanical culture पहुंचा, Puranic tales पहुंची, right? And from that very period, from the Pallava period onwards, the rulers tried to adopt the same philosophy of rule of the state as the Dharma Shastras. So by this point of time, permeate हो चुका था within the South Indian ruling philosophy the rules of the Dharma Shastra. So it is not surprising at all. Secondly, क्यों इतना ज्यादा विजयनगर एम्परर्स ने स्ट्रेस किया that we need to rule in accordance with the Dharma Shastra? How had they formed their state? State का formation हुआ कैसे था? With rebellion against the Delhi Sultanate. What kind of a power was the Delhi Sultanate? A Muslim power, right? तो अब अपने इस एक्शन को, रिबेलियन को जस्टिफाई करने के लिए कोई ना कोई सहारा तो लेना पड़ेगा ना. तो इन्होंने क्या सहारा लिया? That we are the correct rulers for this region, we are the legitimate rulers for this region because we are the protectors of dharma. And how to protect dharma? Not only by resisting Islamic invasions and Islamic aggression, but also by observing the rules of the Dharma Shastras. That is the correct way of doing things, and we, the rulers of Vijayanagara, are going to make every effort to ensure that the rules of the Dharma Shastra are followed. ठीक है? तो once again, जो historical traditions है उसका imprint पड़ा, and जो prevailing conditions है उसका imprint भी पड़ेगा in making the Dharma Shastras popular in the South, especially during the Vijayanagar period. Is this clear? All right. ठीक है. हाँ, क्या लिखा था अभी आपने लास्ट? हाँ, towards the general population. सब पॉइंट लिखो. एग्जाम्पल, कृष्णदेव राया in the अमुक्त मर्यादा, in the अमुक्त मर्यादा proclaims that a king should protect the good, a king should protect the good and punish the evil. And punish the evil. Full stop. Nothing should escape his justice, and the people should be taxed heavily or lightly? Lightly. The people should be taxed lightly. ठीक है? Is this clear? अगला पॉइंट लिखो. हाँ, मेन पॉइंट ही. We are talking about central administration only. Next, write down. The king was not only the supreme political, legal, judicial, and military official. Political, legal, judicial, and military officer, comma. He was also considered to be the religious sovereign of the state. Full stop. Sub point. The Vijayanagar state was based on the concept of the divine origin of kingship. Of the divine origin of kingship. Full stop. Sub point. The Vijayanagar rulers ruled as representatives of the supreme god, Lord Virupaksh. Lord Virupaksh. ठीक है, तो जितने भी रॉयल ऑर्डर्स निकलते थे ना, किस नाम से साइन किए जाते थे? लॉर्ड विरूपाक्ष के नाम से. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. द किंग्स maintained a large council of ministers. Known as the Mantri Parishad. With senior ministers looking after different subjects of administration. Next main point. Below it was the secretariat known as Sachivalaya. Consisting of department heads and representatives from the provinces and Amar Nayakas. Full stop. Sub point. While the Mantri Parishad was in charge of policy decisions, day-to-day administration was overseen by the Sachivalaya. Full stop. Next sub point. The ministers served at the pleasure of the king. And their role was largely advisory. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. The Vijayanagara Empire also had a fixed rule of succession. Full stop. Either the younger brother or eldest son of the king was appointed as the crown prince. Was appointed as the crown prince. Full stop. Sorry, इसमें कंटिन्यू करो, फुल स्टॉप हटा दो. Crown prince during his lifetime, or during the king's lifetime, during the king's lifetime. Full stop. Sub point. The Yuvraj gained administrative experience and ruled jointly with the king, resulting in a smooth transfer of power. A smooth ट्रांसफर ऑफ पावर. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. अच्छा, ये जो आइडिया है अबाउट द पोजीशन ऑफ द किंग, इज दिस द थ्योरेटिकल आइडिया या फिर प्रैक्टिस में भी एग्जैक्टली ऐसा ही होता होगा? प्रैक्टिस में कोई जरूरी नहीं है कि एग्जैक्टली ऐसा ही होता हो. वी हैव आल्सो सीन एपिसोड्स where due to internal instability, due to external aggression, the position of the king has been weakened, right? And kings have had to respond accordingly in order to stabilize the situation. Those who were successful were able to survive, they were able to prosper, but those who failed, they were rooted out. तो उनकी डायनेस्टी ही खत्म हो गई, नई डायनेस्टी आ गई. दिस इज व्हाट हैपेंड टू द संगम डायनेस्टी, to the Suluva dynasty, then to the Tuluva dynasty also. ठीक है, क्योंकि some of the later kings of these dynasties were unable to manage the internal complications. And why is that? Because of the fragmentary forces present within the empire at all times. Write down. It should not be forgotten. It should not be forgotten that the position of the king was in a constant state of flux. Was in a constant state of flux. State of flux. And general trend क्या था? In the beginning, the administration was relatively what? More or less centralized? No, relatively more centralized. And with the progression of time, कम और कम होता गया किंग का अथॉरिटी. ठीक है, तो राइट डाउन. A general trend that appeared was that Vijayanagara administration became more and more decentralized. With the passage of time. तो अब बताओ कि जो फ्यूडल एलिमेंट्स हैं वो बिगिनिंग में ज्यादा स्ट्रांग होंगे या टुवर्ड्स द एंड ज्यादा स्ट्रांग होंगे? टुवर्ड्स द एंड डिसेंट्रलाइज्ड हो गया है मामला. ठीक है, इज दिस क्लियर? ये हो गया सेंट्रल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. नेक्स्ट व्हाट डू वी हैव टू सी? प्रोविंशियल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. तो देखो, within the Vijayanagar empire na, although provincial administration was there, but since the very beginning इसको uniformly apply नहीं किया जाता था. Suppose this is the center, तो ये जो नॉर्थ कर्नाटका आंध्रा वाला रीजन है, यहाँ पे किंग का कंट्रोल स्ट्रॉन्गेस्ट होता था. बट इन द तमिल कंट्री हिज कंट्रोल वाज नॉट वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग. दिस वाज नॉट द कोर रीजन ऑफ द एम्पायर. तो ये बताओ कि यहाँ पे ज्यादा किंग को कॉम्प्रोमाइजेस करने पड़ेंगे या फिर यहाँ पर? यहाँ पे ज्यादा कॉम्प्रोमाइज करना पड़ेगा या यहाँ पर? जहाँ पे अथॉरिटी ज्यादा होती है वहां पे कॉम्प्रोमाइज करने की जरूरत होती है? आपके हाथ में डंडा है, आप जो चाहो कर सकते हो. तो कॉम्प्रोमाइज किधर करना होगा? इस वाले रीजन में. सिमिलरली some of the peripheral regions even in the north, they were unstable क्योंकि these were areas of contest with some of the external enemies, जैसे कि रायचूर दोआब वाला रीजन हो गया, कृष्ण गोदावरी डेल्टा वाला रीजन हो गया, कोंकण कोस्ट दाभोल गोवा ये वाला रीजन हो गया, राइट? अब यहाँ पर what is going to be the priority of the king? To keep the local chiefs over there happy or not? नहीं, हैप्पी रखना चाहेंगे. क्यों? क्योंकि अगर इनको दुखी किया तो ये क्या करेंगे? सीधे बहमनी की गोद में जाकर के बैठ जाएंगे, राइट? बिकॉज दे आर मोर देन हैप्पी टू अप्रिशिएट देम, टू अपीज देम. ठीक है. एंड एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ दिस, जो विजयनगर का प्रोविंशियल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन है, दैट हैड अ ग्रेट डिग्री ऑफ लोकल एंड हिस्टोरिकल वेरिएशन. यूनिफॉर्म नहीं होता था. In peripheral areas, in frontier regions, strategically important regions, and the Tamil country, the kings tried to maintain friendly relations with the local chiefs. ठीक है. These elements were granted more or less authority. इनको ज्यादा फ्रीडम दिया जाएगा या कम फ्रीडम दिया जाएगा? ज्यादा फ्रीडम दिया जाएगा ताकि ये खुश रहें. They were granted greater autonomy they also had fewer responsibilities towards the center. ठीक है. So demand of men in the army, demand for taxes, that would also be lesser. So they were given fewer liabilities. They were also shown privilege by the center in the form of confirming their hereditary lands, property and titles. And as far as possible, their concerns were kept in mind while formulating policies at the center, especially those policies which had a direct impact on the affairs of these chiefs, on the interests of these chiefs. So there was policy coordination as far as possible. And return to all of this, in return for all of this, ये जो local chiefs हैं, would they have to give anything to the center or not? कुछ तो देना पड़ेगा. क्या? Their trust and loyalty. They will have to accept the Vijayanagar emperor's sovereignty. They will have to publicly demonstrate their loyalty on regular occasions in a frequent manner, and they will have to pay a regular tribute. In addition to this, whenever the king calls upon them to assist him in an offensive or defensive war, they will have to respond. So they are going to have military obligations towards the ruler. ठीक है? तो ये तो हो गया पेरिफेरल एरियाज, फ्रंटल एरियाज की कहानी, फ्रंटियर एरियाज की कहानी. तो वहां पे लोकल चीफ्स हैड टू बी अपीज्ड. Did the king have the same priority in other regions of his empire, in the core regions? तो वहां पे भी इस तरह की उसके पास कंपल्शंस होंगे या नहीं होंगे? क्यों होंगे? क्योंकि उसका तो यहाँ पे बाकी जगहों पे अथॉरिटी ज्यादा स्ट्रांग है, राइट? तो देयर इज नॉट गोइंग टू बी एनी लोकल चीफ्स. तो वहां पे वो क्या करेगा? ही इज गोइंग टू डिवाइड द रिमाइंडर ऑफ हिज टेरिटरी इनटू प्रोविंसेस. राज्य या मंडलम बोलते हैं इसको, ठीक है? एंड ओवर हियर किसको अपॉइंट करेगा ये? प्रोविंशियल गवर्नर्स को. ही इज गोइंग टू एक्सरसाइज अ ग्रेटर कंट्रोल ओवर विच ऑफ दीज? तो गवर्नर्स के ऊपर या फिर लोकल चीफ्स के ऊपर? किसके ऊपर ज्यादा अथॉरिटी होगी इसकी? गवर्नर्स के ऊपर. गवर्नर्स को तो इसने अपॉइंट किया ना, लोकल चीफ्स तो हेरिडेटरी हैं, इनको ये हटा नहीं सकता. गवर्नर्स whenever he wants, he can install them, he can remove them, he can move them around. The bulk of the governors were the members of his immediate family, either his sons or his brothers, right? So provincial administration was more suitable for the for the projection of central control. लेकिन ये जो chiefly administration है, that was less conducive. Is this much clear? लिखो. Give the subheading provincial administration. Write down. In the Vijayanagar Empire, provincial administration had distinct regional and historical variations. Question है, had the king maintained friendly relations with local chiefs in peripheral areas during entire period of Vijayanagar Empire, or when decentralization became more pronounced? नहीं, तो this is going to be the policy of every ruler, ठीक है? Especially in the peripheral areas, you need to convince them to remain on your side, because you don't want them to go into the open arms of your enemies, strengthening them. So this was a policy maintained by all the rulers, beginning to the end. Okay. हाँ, क्या लिखा आपने? हाँ, रीजनल एंड हिस्टोरिकल वेरिएशंस. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. इन पेरिफेरल एंड फ्रंटियर एरियाज, in peripheral and frontal areas and frontier areas such as the Tamil country, such as the Tamil country or the Raichur Doab, or the Raichur Doab, comma, the Vijayanagar emperors adopted a lenient policy, adopted a lenient policy towards the local chiefs in an attempt to, in an attempt to bring about greater political integration and preventing preventing the possibility of the possibility of them joining hands with Vijayanagar's enemies. Full stop. Subpoint. As part of this appeasement, as part of this appeasement, comma, local chiefs were given, इनको आप लिख सकते हो, greater autonomy, fewer liabilities, greater autonomy, comma, fewer liabilities, hereditary titles, and policy coordination as far as possible. And policy coordination as far as possible. Next point. In return, the kings expected, EXPECTED, the kings expected the recognition of their sovereignty by the chiefs, comma, the payment of regular tribute and fulfillment of military obligations, especially during war. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. On the other hand, comma, the kings were not compelled to adopt this loose policy in the core regions, of the empire, and thus introduced provincial administration, ठीक है. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. हाँ, इसी में ही प्रोविंशियल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के अंदर ही नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. The empire was divided into provinces known as राज्य और मंडलम. Headed by an official known as राज्यपाल और प्रधान. सब पॉइंट. The pradhan was usually a member of the royal family. In the earlier period. अब बाद में क्या होगा? As the polity becomes more and more feudalized, तो प्रधान कौन होगा? जो टॉप मिलिट्री ऑफिशियल्स हैं. ठीक है, फुल स्टॉप. Later, the position of pradhan was occupied by military aristocrats. ठीक है, military aristocrats. ऑलराइट, अगला पॉइंट लिखो. हाँ, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट. The governors enjoyed wide-ranging powers, including the right to number 1, collect taxes and maintain general administration. Number 2, to maintain a military and defend the people. तो ये तो वो ड्यूटीज हैं जो ट्रेडिशनली एवरी प्रोविंशियल गवर्नर यूज टू एंजॉय इन एवरी किंगडम, ठीक है, तो वो चाहे पुराने चाहे नए. Apart from this, the governors in the Vijayanagar Empire also enjoyed some extraordinary powers, such as the right to levy and abolish taxes. ठीक है, so without consultation of the center, provincial governors had the responsibility to introduce any new tax or remove any existing tax. ये जनरली पावर राज्यपाल के पास दूसरे किंगडम्स में नहीं होता था. And largely to issue coins in their own name. ठीक है, तो सिक्के के ऊपर हमेशा किसका इमेज होता है? किंग का, राइट. बट नाउ the governors were given the authority to issue coins as well. ठीक है, so they were also participating in the monetary policy of the state. Is this clear? Next point लिखो. Next main point. The Raj was further subdivided into districts known as Valanadu और कोल्लम. वलनाडु और कोल्लम. ठीक है. एंड व्हाट अबाउट द एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर्स एट दिस लेवल? वो कहां से आते थे? Did the king or the provincial governor used to appoint them, or were the local hereditary elements? That it would depend कि किस रीजन में ये वलनाडु एग्जिस्ट करता है एंड किस टाइम पीरियड में एग्जिस्ट करता है. Initially, they were all maintained by the state, but later as feudalism became entrenched, तो यहाँ पे जो local military officials थे, they became permanent in nature. ठीक है. Now below the Valnadu was the Nadu, right, which itself was further subdivided into group of villages known as Sthal or Melagram. And the lowest unit of administration was the village assembly known as Ur. Is this clear? Now write down. हाँ, चोला पीरियड में भी ऐसा ही था. तो हमने देखा ना that Vijayanagar administration was shaped both by local traditions as well as the classical model of state in North India. तो ये एक उसका प्रूफ मिलता है हमको. तो राइट डाउन. हाँ, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट. Initially, comma, Vijayanagar Empire, or sorry, Vijayanagar Provincial Administration was more centralized. But later, it became more and more feudal. Full stop. The concept of Rajas as an administrative and revenue unit disappeared completely by the period of Krishnadev Raya. By the period of Krishnadev Raya. And was replaced by the वो जो सिस्टम ऑफ फ्यूडल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन होता है उसको क्या बोलते हैं? Replaced by the Nayankara system. ठीक है? तो अब नेक्स्ट क्या डिस्कस करना है हमको? ये नयनकारा सिस्टम डिस्कस कर लेते हैं. ठीक है? नयनकारा सिस्टम है क्या? It was the feudal system, feudal arrangement of administration which emerged in Vijayanagar, especially during the later half of the Vijayanagara Empire. ठीक है? What were the reasons for the feudalization of polity? Constant warfare had resulted in the militarization of the state. Military had become the most important pillar of the state, and military officials had become increasingly powerful. The state had become more and more dependent upon its military strength and its military commanders for its survival and growth. तो जितना ज्यादा उनका contribution होगा towards the political life, that much would be their reward also. Now, the top military officials were known as Nayakas or Amar Nayakas. Now, initially, they used to be paid in the form of cash salaries, but gradually, the practice of paying them in the form of land revenue assignments emerged. And ultimately, ये जो temporary land revenue assignments होते थे, they became permanent and hereditary in nature. Thus, they started getting paid in terms of permanent land grants known as अमरम ग्रांट्स. ठीक है? तो अमरम ग्रांट्स क्या है? These are land grants given to Amar Nayakas, the top military officials. So as the land grants became hereditary, so too did the position of Amar Nayakas. So मिलिट्री में अपॉइंटमेंट्स के ऊपर जो राजाओं के पास फ्रीडम होता था, अथॉरिटी होता था, दैट एंडेड. नाउ द टॉप मिलिट्री क्लास बिकेम हेरिडिटरी इन नेचर. इज दिस क्लियर? अच्छा. And since they were governing these large parcels of land in a hereditary manner, they also became involved in day-to-day administration, at least in their regions. So they began enjoying some of the sovereign powers, such as किस तरह की powers मिली इनको? The right to collect taxes, the right to administer general administration, and the right to maintain forces the right to construct and maintain forts, etc. तो मिलिट्री एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में भी डायरेक्ट रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी, ठीक है। नाउ द टॉप नायकास were known as Amar Nayakas, but subordinate officials were also given similar treatment. In fact, Amar Nayakas used to maintain their own forces, है ना, and उनके जो subordinate officials होंगे, they were also paid in the same manner. तो जो lower officials हैं, मतलब जो subordinates हैं Amar Nayakas के, they were known as Ayagas, and they were paid in the form of land grants known as Palayam land. Is this clear? Now, किस तरह का पिक्चर दिख रहा है आपको? A centralized one or a decentralized one? Decentralized one. Now, why? Because the king does not have any control over the appointment or removal of the Amar Nayakas, who were extremely important. They were not only militarily significant, but they were also important from the point of view of taming the countryside, making sure that it remains stable and loyal, right? तो अब किस तरह का कंट्रोल एग्जर्ट करेगा सेंटर ऑन दीज अमर नायकास, कैसे उनको कंट्रोल में रखेगा? हाँ, किंग कैसे कंट्रोल में रखेगा इन अमर नायकास को? देखो, थियोरेटिकली तो द लैंड्स गिवन टू द नायकास कुड बी टेकन अवे, बट वाज दिस प्रैक्टिकली पॉसिबल? नहीं, क्योंकि किसी एक अमर नायका को उसका लैंड वापस मांग लिया जाए, वापस छीन लिया जाए, he is definitely going to rebel. It is also going to create panic among the other Amar Nayakas. So they are all going to band together against the king. And before he eliminates us, let us get rid of him. So वो होता नहीं था practically, right? Therefore, the rulers had to adopt other policies to maintain control over the Amar Nayakas. Now, all of these were military officials, and military में what was the strongest wing? What was the most effective kind of military? किस तरह का यूनिट? इन्फेंट्री यूनिट या फिर कैवलरी यूनिट या फिर एलिफेंट यूनिट? कैवलरी यूनिट. सो किंग्स could control the supply of horses, thus ensuring that the Amar Nayakas never became inordinately strong. ठीक है. Later on, एक नया ऑफिशियल इन्होंने इंट्रोड्यूस किया, known as महामंडलेश्वर. ठीक है. Now, this new official was supposed to maintain relations and oversee the movement of Amar Nayakas. 3 or 4 Amar Nayakas का ये supervision करता था. So he was the most powerful among a fewer of the among 3 or 4 of the Amar Nayakas. Now let us see that. Consider this. This is the Vijayanagara Empire. Over here, the king and his court. बाकी जहां पर कई सारे छोटे छोटे अमर नायकास who are all competing against each other, constantly conspiring against the center, trying to maximize their own power, wealth and authority. Right? Now, how to manage them? इनको मैनेज करना बहुत ज्यादा मुश्किल हो जाता. Why? Because sometimes in order to appease this particular अमर नायका, हो सकता है कि इस वाले को डिसप्लीज करना पड़ता. तो उसमें नुकसान किसका होता? सेंटर का होता, किंग का होता. So what started happening from the reign of अच्युता राया onwards is that ये एक रीजन को क्लब कर दिया गया एंड वन ऑफ देम वाज डेजिग्नेटेड एज द महामंडलेश्वर. Right? He was usually the one who was strongest. ठीक है, आउट ऑफ दीज 3 or 4 ये स्ट्रॉन्गेस्ट हुआ करता था. सो ही ऑलरेडी हैड द ग्रेटेस्ट मिलिट्री, ही ऑलरेडी हैड द मोस्ट नंबर ऑफ मेन, ही ऑलरेडी हैड द लार्जेस्ट रिसोर्सेज अवेलेबल. नाउ इट इज हिज रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी टू मैनेज रिलेशंस विद द अदर अमरनायकास अंडर हिज इन्फ्लुएंस. ठीक है, so now there is a degree of separation between the king and the amarnayakas. Secondly, is it easier to deal with 3 or 4 Mahamandaleshwars, or is it easier to deal with, let us say, 50 Amarnayakas? तो 3-4 से आप डील करो, काम हो जाएगा. ठीक है, so it is more convenient also. ठीक है, फर्दर एक और इंस्ट्रूमेंट ऑफ कंट्रोल होता था एंड दैट वाज रेगुलर इंस्पेक्शंस एंड training of the soldiers being maintained by the Amarnayakas under royal supervision. So royal agents used to be present in the court of every Amarnayaka and they would regularly inspect and oversee the training of the soldiers under their control. ठीक है, further the use of spies was common. The kings used to maintain a large number of spies in the courts of the Amarnayakas to keep them informed of any important developments that were taking place. Further, इसके अलावा the use of political and military representatives in order to ensure better coordination between the center and the Amarnayakas. The king used to send 2 representatives to the court of every Amarnayaka. Similarly, every Amarnayaka used to send 2 representatives to the center in return. So one political and one military representative. So political affairs में और military policy में दोनों levels के बीच में coordination चलता रहे, उसके लिए ये mechanism use किया जाता था. And finally, the tradition of maintaining or projecting ritual sovereignty over the Amarnayakas by the kings. So at the time of granting hereditary titles and lands to the Amarnayakas, they were also given certain liberties, such as the right to construct a temple in their land, right? A temple construction करके they used to get themselves confirmed in the eyes of the people through the priestly class at that temple, right? तो ये authority, ये right कि हाँ you are now authorized to construct a temple at your expense on your land, ये कौन देगा? सेंटर ही दे सकता है, लोग अपने आप से नहीं कर सकते हैं. Is this clear? Secondly, some of the other privileges were very, very closely protected. So, for example, the right to construct canals, the right to dig canals and wells, etc. This was a right exercised by the center, and ये right devolve किया जाता था on specific occasions as a form of reward. ठीक है, इससे फायदा क्या होगा? Because of greater availability of water, the people living under the control of Amar Nayakas will be able to expand agriculture, right? So the Amar Nayaka is going to become more popular in the eyes of the people. His resources are also going to grow, right? Now this is a very valuable thing. और ये कौन कंट्रोल करता था? सेंटर कंट्रोल करता था, because it was a very valuable thing. So this is another way in which checks were managed upon the authority of the Amar Nayakas. Clear? What is it that you have written till now? अभी कुछ नहीं लिखा है ना नयनकारा सिस्टम में. Write down. The Nayankara system was the system of feudal administration that gradually replaced provincial administration in the Vijayanagar Empire. That gradually replaced provincial administration in the Vijayanagar Empire. Full stop. अगला पॉइंट लिखो. Continuous warfare had made the Vijayanagar state increasingly feudal. Full stop. The military emerged as the most important institution within the state. And military commanders emerged as the most important officials. Full stop. Next point. Initially paid in the form of cash salaries, they were later assigned parcels of land. They were later assigned parcels of land which gradually became hereditary. Full stop. Next point. Land grants enjoyed by Amar Nayakas or Nayakas. Within brackets, you can write top military commanders. Were known as Amaram. Full stop. Next point. Amar Nayakas enjoyed the following powers. Number one, enjoyed the following powers. Number one, to collect taxes from their land. Number two, to administer people living on their land. Number 3, to maintain a certain number of troops, under their control. Next point. Amarnayakas enjoyed greater authority as compared to the typical pradhan, the typical provincial governor. Full stop. They functioned as autonomous, hereditary, feudal lords. Autonomous, hereditary, feudal lords. ठीक है? So that is why they had more authority than the traditional pradhan or traditional provincial official. Next point लिखो. Amarnayakas maintained lower military officials known as Ayaygars, as their feudal substitutes. Sorry, substitute बोल रहा हूँ. Feudal subordinates. As their feudal subordinates. ठीक है? सब पॉइंट लिखो. Ayaygars were also paid in the form of hereditary land grants known as palayam. ठीक है? Next main point. Given the decentralized nature of the Nayankara system and the immense strategic value of maintaining control over the military aristocracy, comma, the Vijayanagara rulers came up with innovative solutions. ठीक है? तो क्या लिखा है आपने? Given the decentralized nature of the Nayankara system and the strategic value of maintaining control over the military aristocracy, the Vijayanagara rulers came up with innovative solutions. Full stop. These included number one, controlling the supply of horses so as to control the ambition of the feudal lords. Number two, regularly inspecting the soldiers maintained by the Amarnayakas and being directly involved in their training. Number three, utilizing an elaborate system of spies to keep an eye on the activities of Amarnayakas. Number four, exchanging political and military representatives with each Amarnayaka in order to achieve greater coordination. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट कौन सा है? नंबर फाइव, imposing the element of ritual sovereignty by controlling the process of temple consecration, CONSECRATION, consecration. ठीक है. नेक्स्ट, हाँ नहीं, नंबर कौन सा है? नंबर 6, maintaining a strict control over the distribution of rights to collect revenue from expansion of irrigation. ठीक है. सो अमरनायकास के पास कौन सा पावर नहीं होता था जो कि द प्रोविंशियल गवर्नर्स यूज्ड टू एंजॉय? द राइट टू अबॉलिश और लेवी एनी न्यू टैक्स. ठीक है. तो वो जो टैक्सेशन का पॉलिसी है, दैट वाज कंट्रोल्ड बाय द सेंटर फ्रॉम द बिगिनिंग टू द एंड. ठीक है. that included the right to generate any income, any additional income by undertaking a new construction project, especially the right to generate income from irrigation projects. ठीक है, तो वो सेंटर कंट्रोल करता था और कुछ ही लोगों को ये राइट दिया जाता था. क्लियर? So they are going to remain loyal to the center only. Next right, number 7. From the period of Achyuta Raya onwards, comma, an official known as the Mahamandaleshwar was appointed as an intermediary between the crown and the Amarnayakas. Between the crown and the Amarnayakas. ठीक है? इसी में कंटिन्यू. It was easier to control a handful of Mahamandaleshwars rather than controlling dozens of Amarnayakas. Dozens of DOZNS, dozens of Amarnayakas. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया देखो अपना नयनकारा सिस्टम. टेक डाउन अ क्वेश्चन. Discuss the characteristics of the Nayankara system under the Vijayanagara Empire. Full stop. How did the Vijayanagar rulers exercise control over them? Exercise control over them. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया the Nayankara system. Next क्या है? The Ayagar system. क्या था ये? It was the system of Vijayanagar village local self-governance. So write down It was the system of Vijayanagar village local self-governance. ठीक है. Next point. It was borrowed from the local self-governance of which period? Chola period. The local self-governance of the Chola period. But by this point of time क्या हुआ था? There was a decline in the democratic credentials of village self-administration. However, there had been a distinct decline. Full stop. तो चोला विलेज सेल्फ गवर्नेंस में क्या देखने के लिए मिलता था? That there used to be annual elections, है ना? A number of committees were chosen by the entire community of the village. तो उसके लिए members elect होते थे. The village was divided into 30 wards. From every ward, one member used to be elected as the representative, and several committees में वो members divide होते थे. Each committee performing a different function. Over here, that element of democracy election, all of that is going to go away. Write down. Next point. The elected committees of the Chola period were replaced by a council of 12 hereditary chiefs. Council of 12 hereditary chiefs. ठीक है? With each of them performing a specific task related to local administration. ठीक है? They were paid in the form of hereditary land grants, on which they did not have to pay any taxes. Full stop. Next point. Further, comma, the offices were also transferable. मतलब ऑफिशियल्स को ट्रांसफर नहीं किया जाएगा. द पोजीशन कुड बी सोल्ड टू अ डिफरेंट पर्सन इन एक्सचेंज फॉर मनी. was also transferable and could be sold by the holder in return for money. In return for money. Full stop. Next point. In most cases, comma, the local hereditary chiefs belong to which section of the population? Elite or commoners? Elites होते थे. Represented the local elites. Hereditary chiefs represented the socio-economic elites. Represented the socio-economic elites. And ये किसके allies होते थे? In the, no, not the king, the Amar Nayakas and the Palayagars, and were allies of the local feudal elements. ठीक है. So is it the first point of Ayagar system topic? दिखाओ first point क्या लिखवाया है. It was the system of Vijayanagara village local self-government. अच्छा, लॉग आउट हो गए थे. तो अभी ऐसा करते हैं, क्लास के बाद इसका फोटो खींच के आयगार सिस्टम वाला अपलोड कर देंगे. ठीक है. इफ यू वांट आई कैन एक्सप्लेन इट टू यू अगेन. इतना कर सकते हैं हम. तो क्या है भाई आयगार सिस्टम? इट इज द सिस्टम ऑफ विजयनगर लोकल विलेज सेल्फ गवर्नमेंट. इट इज अ कंटिन्यूएशन ऑफ द Chola village local self-governance, but with heavy modifications. It represents a deterioration of the Chola village self-governance. What was the most remarkable element of Chola village self-governance? It's a democracy, the system of annual elections, where 30 council members were elected every year to be divided into different committees known as variums. नहीं, वहां पे चोला की बात कर रहे हैं. Here in village in Vijayanagar village governance, village administration, those 30 elected members have been replaced by 12 hereditary chiefs. तो ये पीढ़ी दर पीढ़ी इसी फैमिली के मेंबर्स एडमिनिस्ट्रेटिव पोजीशंस को एंजॉय करेंगे. They were also enjoying hereditary land grants in that village itself. They were also exempt from paying taxes. तो ये hereditary land grants इनको देता कौन था? The superior feudal lords, right? And each of these 12 hereditary chiefs maintained their control over different aspects of village government. So somebody, for example, would be in charge of maintaining roads, somebody would be in charge of maintaining the temple, somebody would be in charge of maintaining the wells and other irrigation facilities, tanks, canals, etc. Somebody would be in charge of organizing festivals, markets, fairs, etc. Somebody would be responsible for regulating the quality of goods being sold. Somebody would be in charge of regulating the supply of essential commodities, managing the prices, etc. Right? So अलग अलग responsibilities हर एक member की होंगी, and वहां पर there was complete exclusivity. ठीक है. So you did not use to share power with anybody else in each of those areas. So there was seldom any cooperation. ठीक है. Now these people belong to which section of the population? Primarily elites, right? So they came from the socio-economic elites. Most of them were belonging to the Brahmin Varna. So ज़्यादातर Brahmins होते थे. They were also allies of the local feudal elements. So they were actually not the allies of the common people. Rather, they were the allies of their feudal superordinates, feudal supervisors. ठीक है? And thus, the Ayagar system represents a bastardized version of Chola self-governance, Chola village administration. ठीक है? क्लियर है विकी? समझ में आया है? या नाउ क्लियर? ठीक है. नाउ तो ये हो गया देखो अपना विजयनगर का आयगार सिस्टम. नाउ दी revenue administration. What were the important sources of state income? Chief source, the biggest source of state income was land revenue. For this purpose, land used to be divided into three categories. Manya land, Amaram land, and Bhandarwada land. Bhandarwada land was Crown's land. That means the revenue generated from Bhandarwada land belonged exclusively to the Crown. सीधे के सीधे उसमें तिजोरी के अंदर जो सॉरी ट्रेजरी होता था उसके अंदर जाता था, राइट? अमरम लैंड was the land granted to Amar Nayakas. So these were feudal grants. Could the state rely upon a regular source of income from Amaram lands? तो अमरम लैंड से बहुत बड़ा चंक आएगा इनके पास इनकम का? नहीं आएगा. Only marginal tributes they are going to generate. And Manya land was land enjoying tax concession. So this was tax concessional land. दो कैटेगरीज का होता था. ब्रह्मदेय एंड Devdan land. Brahmadeya land was the land granted to Brahmins. Devdana land was the land granted to temples. ठीक है? Now, various sources, both Indian as well as foreign, mention that the regular rate of taxation from Bhandarwada land was 1/6 to 1/3 of the total produce. So कोई fixed rate of taxation था? नहीं, it was a variable. What did it depend upon? The quality of land, the availability of artificial irrigation, and the types of crops being grown, the quality of the soil. अमरम ग्रांट्स में से एक्चुअली रेवेन्यू नहीं जनरेट होता था, दे यूज टू जनरेट ओनली ट्रिब्यूट. ठीक है. So out of the total revenue that was collected from the entire Amaram land, only a small fraction used to be remitted to the center, and that also not as a tax, rather as a tribute. ठीक है. अच्छा. Manya land, Brahmadeya land, that is land granted to temples and to Brahmins, and Devdana land granted to temples. यहाँ पे क्या equation था? They were not completely exempt from taxation. They were virtually exempt from taxation, लेकिन not completely. Brahmadeya land still had to pay 1/20th of the total produce as revenue to the state, and Devdana land से rate was 1/30th of the total produce. ठीक है. अब क्या लगता है आपको that to maintain a large army, to maintain a large administration, to overcome serious internal and external challenges, इन तीनों में से अगर परसेंटेज वाइज देखा जाए तो सबसे ज्यादा क्या होना चाहिए? मान्या लैंड, अमरम लैंड और भंडारवादा लैंड. सबसे ज्यादा परसेंटेज वाइज कौन सा होना चाहिए? अरे क्राउन लैंड, भंडारवादा सबसे ज्यादा होना चाहिए. बट इन रियलिटी भंडारवादा वाज द स्मॉलेस्ट प्रपोर्शन ऑफ लैंड विद इन द विजयनगर एम्पायर. यानी कि ऑल्दो land revenue was the most important source of income for the state could not survive only relying upon land revenue. It also needed to rely upon some other sources. So what were the other sources, other important sources? Tolls, tariffs, customs, and fines. ठीक है. Along with service taxes, and sales taxes, within which various activities such as the sale and purchase of goods, provision of services such as maintaining an inn or kitchen or a dancing house or a gambling den or a drinking house were all subject to varying degrees, varying rates of taxes. ठीक है. अच्छा, apart from this, houses, factories, and grazing animals के ऊपर भी एडिशनल टैक्सेस देने होते थे। ठीक है, इनफैक्ट इवन मैरिजेस यूज्ड टू बी टैक्स्ड। तो शादी करो तो भी स्टेट एक टैक्स लेता था। ऑलराइट, नाउ while land revenue remained a big portion of the entire income of the state, it had to be it had to be supplemented by these additional taxes in order to sustain the elaborate administration and military of the Vijayanagara Empire. So write down, while land revenue remained a major source of state income, it had to be supplemented by the additional taxes and levies in order to sustain the elaborate Vijayanagar military and administration. The elaborate Vijayanagar military and administration. ठीक है, चलो गुड। देखो, there has been a criticism of the Vijayanagar taxation system. क्या कि although the rate of taxes were low, but the number of taxes was very high, and इसका result क्या हुआ? That the overall burden of taxation was extremely high. तो अब ये बताओ that what was the quality of life of the people, ordinary people in the Vijayanagar Empire? Was this high burden of taxation justified or not? Justified था ज्यादातर। क्यों? Because although the overall burden of taxation may have been high, Vijayanagar Empire coincided with a period of general prosperity. So people were able to live comfortably even after all these taxes, even after the large number of taxes, high burden of taxes. Secondly, the state had a number of priorities which needed to be fulfilled, for which large amount of resources were required. So it was important for the state to maintain a healthy status to increase its revenue collection. Thirdly, जो टैक्सेशन रेजिम है वो कैसा था? प्रोग्रेसिव और रिग्रेसिव? प्रोग्रेसिव था। तो bulk of the taxes were coming in the form of commercial taxes and fines. However, the rate of land revenue, which was causing the greatest burden on the common person, that was low. On the peasant, that was relatively low. Bulk of the taxes कहां से आ रहे थे? External sources से. For example, tolls, tariffs, customs, fines, commercial enterprises से आ रहे थे, right? So the common poor person was spared from the heavy burden of taxation. And finally, state use किस लिए कर रहा था इसको? In order to defend the common people, in order to provide them effective governance, and in order to create necessary infrastructure which was beneficial for social welfare and economic welfare of the common people. तो ऐसा नहीं है that it was being used only for the kings to live a lavish life. वो था, लेकिन इसके अलावा और भी बहुत सारी चीजें स्टेट कर रहा था. Thus it remains justified. ठीक है, write down a common criticism of the Vijayanagar taxation system is that the Vijayanagar state levied too many taxes. Is that the state levied too many taxes, thus imposing a heavy combined burden of taxation. Next point. However, upon closer observation, we realize that given the general environment of prosperity, it is natural for the state to seek its share of the resources. ठीक है. Next point. Further, the Vijayanagar tax regime appeared to be quite progressive. Full stop. Sub point लिखा. While the taxes on ordinary peasants remained low, the bulk of the taxes or bulk of the income was generated in the form of commercial taxes and fines. From wealthy sections. Last point लिखो. Lastly, while it is true that the overall burden of taxes was high, comma, the state was concerned with public welfare and this was reflected in the state's expenditure. ठीक है, तो ये हो गया revenue administration. Take down a question. Enumerate the revenue sources of the Vijayanagar Empire. Full stop. Would it be accurate to characterize the Vijayanagar tax regime as exploitative? Question mark. 200 words हो जाएगा? समझ में आया ना? तो रेवेन्यू इनकम के सोर्सेस के बारे में बताना है, कौन कौन से थे, एंड वी नीड टू जज कि उसको एक्सप्लॉयटेटिव ऑपरेसिव कहना ठीक होगा या नहीं होगा. तो बताओ ठीक होगा या नहीं होगा? नहीं होगा. नंबर ऑफ टैक्सेस may have been high, but the burden of taxation was justified. ठीक है, it was progressive in nature. The state was concerned about social and public welfare also, और उसके एक्सपेंडिचर में रिफ्लेक्ट होता था. तो ये हो गया the taxation system. नेक्स्ट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में क्या बचता है? 2 डिबेट्स, then we need to talk about society and economy of the Vijayanagar Empire. ठीक है, then we need to discuss the opinions expressed by the foreign travelers regarding the Vijayanagar Empire. और किसके बारे में बात करनी है? डिसइंटीग्रेशन ऑफ द विजयनगर एम्पायर, ये ऑलरेडी डिस्कस कर चुके हैं ना. हाँ, डिक्लाइन ऑफ विजयनगर एम्पायर वी हैव ऑलरेडी डिस्कस्ड. हाँ हाँ, तो आयगार सिस्टम तो विलेज एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन होता है, वो हमने डिस्कस कर लिया है. देयर इज ऑल्सो अ डिबेट regarding the causes for the decline, disintegration of the Vijayanagar Empire. इसके अलावा कुछ और बचता है? हाँ, cultural achievements and contributions, especially the contributions of Krishna Dev Raya. एनीथिंग एल्स? कुछ और? हाँ, फ्यूडल सिस्टम नयनकारा दैट वी हैव कवर्ड. इसके अलावा कुछ और बच रहा है? नहीं? यही है ना? तो ठीक है, तो दिस वी आर गोइंग टू डिस्कस इन आवर नेक्स्ट लेक्चर. तो एक बार रिमाइंड कर देना अगर इसमें से कुछ छूटता है, अदरवाइज मिस ना हो जाए कहीं. ठीक है, चलिए. डिसइंटीग्रेशन ऑफ द विजयनगर एम्पायर, इसके बारे में एक डिबेट है, तो वो डिस्कस करना. ठीक, चलिए. एनी डाउट्स? फोटो भेजने का ऑनलाइन वाले में? हाँ, आयगार सिस्टम का फोटो ना. ठीक है, मैं भेज देता हूँ. चलिए देन, थैंक यू फॉर योर टाइम गाइज. सी यू इन द नेक्स्ट क्लास.